In my early undergraduate years in the zoology department at Aberdeen University, we apprentice scientists were introduced to many diverse topics by our teachers, ideas, theories, and hypotheses, brilliant in their conception and provocative in their articulation. Our lecturers took on the onerous task of dissecting, analyzing, and reconstructing the essence of scientific ideas and using these to overcome the inertia of the reluctant minds of their recalcitrant charges. One of these inspired teachers was Vero Wynne Edwards, professor of zoology at the University of Aberdeen. He taught evolution with conviction and launched himself with proselytic fervor into Darwin's ideas, confirmed over the years by careful observation and methodical deduction. To him Darwin's finches and the ideas that they subsequently set in motion were nothing less than a stroke of genius. As part of his duty of care towards his students, he made us aware of the revolution in natural knowledge crystallized in Darwin's Origin of Species. We were very fortunate to be inspired in this way by the great man's ideas, though I don't doubt that some of us simply memorized the lectures, or parts of them, just in order to pass the final degree examinations. Postgraduate life went on more or less uneventfully, as budding careers were pursued. But I always carried the gospel of evolution tucked away in my mind and never forgotten. As in all gospels, however, believers take it for granted that somewhere beyond the rainbow of our imagination, the New Jerusalem is waiting. In my scientific journeys, I had visite and worked in many countries, and as the years progressed, the lure of the Galapagos Islands had receded. I was therefore surprised and delighted to receive out of the blue, an invitation from Professor Roberto da Navarro, then of the Polytechnic University of Marche, Ancona, to join a team of marine research scientists in a proposed expedition to the Galapagos Islands. There was no case tie-in of turning this invitation down. It would allow me to realize my lifelong but elusive dream. The objective of the proposed expedition did not concern the finches and tortoises which had provided scientific truths and fired the imagination of the scientific world. Nor was it merely an opportunity to study 5 million years of evolution and natural selection in what was called Darwin's living laboratory. The tale of the Darwin finches would not overshadow the purpose of the present expedition, the aims of which were to focus on marine biodiversity issues. Our more mundane but no less interesting tasks concerned an entirely neglected part of the faunal spectrum, the myofauna. It has taken me 41 years almost to the day to realize the significance of Darwin's observations by visiting the Galapagos, to see for myself the magnitude of the most exciting natural experiment on Earth. All the same, I regret that I did not attempt the journey when my intellectual processes were more or less acute and my physical stamina was much greater. Nevertheless, even at this late juncture, there I was on my way to the shrine of evolution, armed not only with my well-thumbed copy of the Voyage of the Beagle, but also David Lack's Darwin's Finches. David Lack was a professor and director of the Edward Gray Institute of Field Ornithology, and a great friend as well as opponent of Wynne Edwards over the matter of what determines clutch size in birds. The project. The formal application to carry out research in the National Park of the Galapagos Lands, GNP, was made by the Polytechnic University of Marche, Ancona, by Professor Roberto da Navarro, the coordinator of the project. He was to be assisted by a team which included Professor Norberto della Croce, of the University of Genoa, assistant professors Antonio Delano, Antonio Pacidu, Cristina Gambi, postdoc Cinzia Coronaldisi, with the subsequent inclusion in the team of Professor Giancarlo Albertelli and Assistant Professor Mario Petrillo of the University of Genoa, and myself, Professor Athanasios Eleftheriou, of the University of Crete. All in all, quite an experienced and powerful team. The project had the intriguing title, Identity and Diversity of Prokaryotic Ectosymbionts of Marine Myofauna, not a subject easily understood by the uninitiated. To put it more simply, the project was to include large-scale but intensive sampling of the myofauna of the shore sediments and the subsequent laboratory examination of the sampled material. As the Galapagos Islands are known as a hotspot of marine biodiversity, the geographic isolation of the islands could well provide new research insights into the status of marine myofauna there and the ecological significance of symbiotic relationships between bacteria and marine invertebrates, myofauna in this case. Previous work conducted in the Galapagos Islands reported that there was an abundance of myofaunal organisms, most of which were new or as yet undescribed, and consequently their ectosymbiotic relationships had never been investigated. The project was scheduled to take place from February 26 to March 19, 2005, a cutback on the original and more ambitious previous plan. Right from the start it was abundantly clear that there was only scanty information available concerning the logistics essential for the forward planning of the project's targets. Reluctantly, we concluded that we could not rely on intuition alone, but would have to navigate our way using knowledge and experience gained from previous similar research which I had carried out on the tropical beaches of the west and the south of India. And we would leave the rest to Providenque. Obtaining approval of all aspects of the research to be carried out triggered a race to obtain permits, arrange insurance, ship our equipment, work out the finances and expenses, and a whole raft of essential bureaucratic details. Some of these issues we were able to resolve before our departure, but others remained pending. Below is a series of extracts from the diary notes I kept at the time, which accounts for their informality and the repetition of some of our daily preoccupations: how to find transport to the beach sampling sites, and food for the body. Friday, February 25. I left Crete on a mild morning in a perplexed state, all the while trying to conjure up a mental picture of the Galapagos Islands. The short flight to Athens took me back to familiar landmarks, although I was still far too preoccupied contemplating details of the trip. I stayed that first night of the trip in my sister Vasia's comfortable flat where I was well looked after. I had to make an early start after a very short night's sleep as Vasia and I reminisced the night away. I felt nothing but optimism as to the outcome of the venture. I didn't think that there was anything left to be resolved because I felt that I had already crossed the Rubicon. That would enable us to bring the project to an acceptable conclusion. It should be stressed that even at that moment we three did not contemplate aborting the mission, even with diminished manpower and expertise. Thus dejected but still resolute and unyielding, we boarded the flight to Quito, Ecuador. The flight was long, very long, 11.5 hours. Fortunately, having left at midday, we arrived in the afternoon, happy to have traveled all the way in daylight, flying high over the Amazon and the Andes, looking at the breathtaking scenery of the tropical rainforests below. We eventually landed in Quito, a city high in the Cordillera Occidental Range, with its airport lying between mountains. Our arrival at the airport brought us both metaphorically and literally to Earth. Clearing customs and retrieving luggage and crates of equipment, in a kind of mini-pandemonium, was, did we but know it, our first real trial of patience and endurance. We were taken to our hotel in Quito, the Dan Carlton, a clean well-run hotel, with helpful staff, nice rooms, a good restaurant and a bar with cold beer, where we were to spend some time before the second leg of our journée on March 2, which would take us to the Galapagos Islands. But almost as soon as we had settled down after the evening meal, we were afflicted by headaches and altitude sickness, not surprising, given that Quito lies at 3,000 m altitude. We had a fitful night's rest, waking up at 3 a.m. Sunday, February 27. Still feeling incapacitated by nausea and nosebleeds, we have to make the first plans for the trip to Galapagos. There is a mountain of regulations to be observed. We have to set out and sort out all the limitations and constraints before us during our stay in the Galapagos. There were long discussions as to how to adapt our original plans and formulate a new plan B to fit the new cold real ity. We had an opportunity to visit the old city, which is surely a must for all visitors. There are fabulous Gothic churches and imposing palaces of the colonial era built in the 16th and 17th centuries when Ecuador was just an impoverished country. The influence of the church over that period comes across as something all-pervading and somehow nefarious. However, the old city itself is rather picturesque, with buildings constructed in the colonial style, ochre and red-colored buildings, and an atmosphere of contrived celebration. Though the atmosphere was festive, with singing, parading, music play and people strolling in the narrow streets, crowds of young children, youngsters, and older people always under the watchful eye of police and army guards. Obligatory siesta in the afternoon after lunch in a nondescript small restaurant. We are all still suffering from nosebleeds, but the situation is gradually improving. After lunch, following a recommendation from an old friend, high rumor of the Leibniz Institute in Kiel, I had a telephone conversation with Gunter Reck, professor for many years at the